Good evening, everybody. This is Read, Write, Local, Unbound. It's a production of Avon Lake Public Library. I'm Jerry Vogel, and I'm here to interview authors about what they like to read, how they write, and they're usually local. And you're Unbound, of course, this time. It's anything goes. All these programs will be recorded and be available on YouTube in the very near future. And you're welcome to join any of them for the next 3 Tuesday nights through August. So tonight's guest, I would say, needs no introduction, but I'm going to introduce him anyway. Jim Tabaczynski is somebody who has actually just wrote his first book, but he's been writing for his entire career. Mostly, there it is, and here it is too. Hard-hitting lessons. It's about not so obvious business lessons learned from playing football. And we'll tell how that book came to be in a little bit. But like I said, he wasn't planning on writing a book. He did writing for a living in PR and training and so on. And he has quite an interesting story, and we're going to hear it tonight. So welcome, Jim.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Welcome, audience.
Pardon me?
Welcome, audience, too. There's a lot of people here tonight, which is good.
Hello, Catherine.
So why don't we go back to the beginning, and you could tell us about one of the main influences on your writing, which was Sister Richard.
Oh my God. I hated Sister Richard, and she didn't like me either. But I spent 2 years, and I had her for 2 years in 7th and 8th grade, and she pounded the English language into my head. We must have diagrammed 5,000 sentences, which was a very good learning tool, if you will. It showed the different parts of speech and how the different elements of the sentence work together and how to build a sentence and so on and so forth. And I never gave a thought to doing any writing at all. But then when I went to college, they said you have to major in something. So I thought, okay, I'll do English, because I was doing better at that than most anything else. So I got an undergraduate degree in English and got out of school from Edinburgh, Pennsylvania, and went to, I started working in broadcasting. Got tired of that pretty quick. And then ended up going back to graduate school and got a master's degree in journalism. And
that was at Kent State, right?
Kent State, yes. And after that, I worked for Curtis Industries in Eastlake, and a couple of different agencies here, PR firms here in town. Went out on my own, went back to work at another firm, and then went back out on my own again. So I've been working on my own for the better part of the last several decades, I guess.
Well, thank you for that sketch of your career to date.
Yep.
And I just wanted to back up a little bit. Broadcasting wasn't really for you, but you did this for a while.
I enjoyed it, but it was just, you work 6 days a week, 51 weeks a year. And then what hit me was I had some friends call me up around the 4th of July, and they said, oh, we're going up to the islands for the 4th of July. We're going to have a picnic. And I said, well, I can't go. And they said, why not? And I said, because I'm working. And they said, but it's 4th of July. And I said, no, it's Thursday. I always work on Thursday. So that's when I started thinking that, yeah, but maybe I don't want to do this anymore.
They had a few people that they required to be there all the time, pretty much.
Well, you had your set schedule. And like I said, 6 days a week, 51 weeks a year, and there were no off days in between, unless you could wrangle something somewhere somehow, and that wasn't always easy. And the people running the stations always had the upper hand, because you could say, hey, if you don't do this, I'm going to quit, and they'd say, fine, there are 10 people standing outside the door waiting for your job.
Yeah, we've all heard that one, haven't we?
Yes, we have. And there are a lot of people in radio, or there are a few people in radio who make a lot of money, and a lot of people who make very little money. And unfortunately, I was in the latter group.
Mm-hmm.
So,
where you go from tiny Quonset hut station to another one, and then sometimes people get their big break, but most of them, they keep moving around. Huh?
That's right. And then I thought one day, well, I've got several years of working in the media, And if I go and do some PR, I started working with some PR people. I was the public affairs director at the last station that I worked at. So I came in contact with a number of PR people. And so I thought it would be kind of a natural progression to go from working in the media to working with the media. So that's what I did.
You were talking about community affairs. It was important back then, long before our digital age, to have a binder full of community things going on, events. And you just talked about how it was a torrent of information that you had to manage.
Yeah, you actually had we had a 3-ring binder like that, and we had all of our live copy for all of our live public service announcements were in there. And when I went to graduate school, and they were talking about the PR part of it, and they would tell the students that when you're sending out a news release or whatever it happens to be, you have to really make it stand out, or else it's just going to get lost in the shuffle. And I don't think most of the students really appreciated that, but I did, because I knew that my last radio job, I would get a stack of mail like that every single day, and 2/3 of it never even got opened. It just went right in the garbage.
You just knew by looking at it, by feeling this is not for us.
There was some labor union used to send me their newsletter. I'm like, why are you sending me this?
Because you're on a list, I guess.
Yeah, I got it on a list somewhere. Or what they would do, they'd say, send us or give us a list of all the media outlets in Cleveland, in this case. And we were on there, so they just started sending it.
They just never bothered to check out whether they were right for you or not. It's not very targeted marketing.
Not at all. That's the old shotgun approach, as they used to call it.
Or spaghetti, as I've heard it.
No, I haven't heard that.
Throw it against the wall, see what sticks.
Shotgun is you shoot, and the pellets from the shotgun just splatter everywhere.
You'll hit something.
Yeah.
But,
so anyways, so then I started working in PR and worked at Curtis Industries, and then a couple of agencies. And when I was at the agencies, I worked for some pretty big companies, Dow Chemical and Babcock and Wilcox and BF Goodrich, and a lot of small companies that you've never heard of. And it was fun because it was something different every day. You never knew what was going to happen.
So what did you learn from doing the PR, like as far as your role in all this? So what did you pick up, and did you end up then moving up and directing lots of other people and doing all the details?
You ended up doing a little bit of everything. I had a couple, like assistant account executives who worked for me. But then I was like for Dow Chemical, for example, it was a very large account. And I think we had probably a dozen or more people working on it. And every Monday morning at 8:15, we'd have a Dow meeting. And we talk about what's going on with all the different disciplines, the advertising group, the sales promotion group, the PR group, and so forth. And then, who's going to Midland this week? So, if we could get 3 or more people going to Midland on the same day, we'd charter a plane because that was cheaper than flying commercial. So just, that was a very good experience for me, because it showed me how the different disciplines work together. Like for a while, the advertising would be very hot and heavy, and the PR would be down. Then the advertising would go down, the PR would come up, and all the time you're working with the sales promotion people. So you really got to see how they all work together and how they played off of one another.
Because the PR is really where you get earned media from, stuff that you didn't pay for. It's just hopefully they're interested enough to give you free airtime or free space.
For the most part, yes. And a lot of that's going away now. There's a lot of what they call pay to play. So if you see somebody interviewed on on Channel 3, for example, there's a very good chance that they paid to be there.
Advertorials.
You could call it that, yeah.
Sometimes they were in the past, but they weren't always disclaimers on them either, and they certainly aren't anymore, especially a lot of this web media.
Yeah. Like I say, it's called pay to play, and if you want to pony up the money, you can get an article. In some publications, though, you'll see they'll say advertisement. They'll put a little ribbon in at the top or the bottom, and then either me or the client would write their own copy for whatever they wanted, and that's what gets run. And the good thing about that for the client is you can tell them not just what to run, but when to run it and where to run it in the paper or the magazine or whatever it happens to be.
You have complete control because you paid for it.
That's right. But with the PR, the traditional PR, it's, you know, if they put it on the last page, then that's where they put it. There's nothing you can do about it.
I think a lot of the PR too depends on having relationships with these writers and editors who are
and
more inclined to work with you maybe than somebody else or trust you.
right. I was working for a client and they were cutting back left and right, and I knew my day was coming. So they said, no, we're going to do all this work in-house. So I said, okay, fine. And then about 6 months later, I got a call from one of the trade book editors, and they said, are you still doing work for them? And I said, no. And he said, good. He said, I figured so, because we haven't heard from them in 6 months. I said, well, they're doing it all in-house now. They're doing it their way. So not much you can do there. No, but I had a client, and I was working with an advertising agency, and advertising people, for the most part, don't get PR at all. And we were able to get a mention in a roundup article in the Wall Street Journal. And we were mentioned in one paragraph out of maybe one story that was maybe 15 inches long. And so we had a meeting the Monday afterwards, and the ad guy is like, wow, that was a -2 on a scale of 1 to 10. And I'm like, we're in the Wall Street Journal. What are you complaining about?
Oh, just for people who are not journalists, when you're talking about column inches, right?
Yes, yes.
And so people who aren't journalists, that's about that many inches, about this wide, and how
Well,
many.
yeah, a column is, well, it's, if you look at a newspaper, you know, that's how wide a column is. And if you stretch it out to 15 inches, that was how long that story would be. Now they'll break it up, maybe like 3 or 4 columns across the page, but they still count them the same.
But yeah, just how long a story is. You're thinking, I
Yeah.
can crank this much. We need 15 inches on that. Done.
Yeah, yeah. Or you gave us 20, we only need 15, lose 5.
Chop, chop. Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. The fun in life of media and advertising and PR.
Yeah.
I guess also that you got into a lot of training and stuff eventually because you were pretty good at this stuff, and then you were good at training people in different companies to do media and stuff, right?
Well, we did do some media training,
Mhm.
but when I worked at Curtis, I was on the organizational chart. I was in the training department, so we did.
Well, this is a good story. Yes.
Yeah, we did scripts for video training videos. We did manuals of all kinds. And you want me to tell that one story that I
Yes. And plus, Curtis, for those who do not know, is
not in business anymore.
but they cut keys.
They made key blanks and key duplicating machines. So if you went into a hardware store and you needed a key, there's a good chance that that machine was made by Curtis or Cole National, one of the two. We were the two big players in that game. But when I was there, they signed a big contract with Kmart, and they were putting in key machines in, I don't know, like 1,000 different Kmart stores or whatever it was. And they said, we need a manual to teach the Kmart employees on how to use the key machine. So I wrote the manual, and maybe 10 years later, actually probably more than that, maybe 15 years later, I was with my daughter, who was maybe 10 at the time, and we were walking through a Kmart store, and they had the key display over there, and I went over and I looked, and there was my book was still laying there, and I poked my daughter and I said, I wrote that book. She was all excited.
Yeah. Well, look at what Daddy did and what an influence he had on the world, because we all have something here and there, right?
Everybody needs keys.
Everybody needs keys. Keys cut.
Yep.
Except masters do not duplicate.
Yep.
But anyway, but also I think you were talking about how I think a presentation you did once, you gave awards for people who spotted the word in red.
Oh, yeah. Actually, that wasn't that long ago. I did a presentation on newsletters, and here are some things you need to consider before you start doing a newsletter. And actually now I put that into a little book that's on my website now. But I had the presentation, I had maybe 10 or 12 PowerPoint slides, and there was one word that I put in red in the whole presentation. And at the end of the presentation, I said, I have a Starbucks gift card here for anybody who can tell me what word was in red. And somebody said they identified it or they remembered it, and it was the word them. And I said, when you're putting together a newsletter, and this really applies for any kind of PR work, It's all about them, the people out there. What you think is important, what you want to write, that doesn't matter. If you want to get something out there, you want people to read it, to remember it, to know whoever it is you are and what you do, it's all about them. You got to put it into a form or couch it in the way that they're going to find it interesting. Because if they don't, then nobody cares. It's the what did the
What's
guy
in it
say?
for me?
Does it pass the so what test?
Yes.
Yes.
Why should you care about this, and what's in it for me? Yes.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Why am I reading this? Why should I care? And that was good for working with journalists too, because the journalist, his underlying question was always, why are my readers going to care about this? Why do they care? Why should they care? And it's not even if the journalist cares. Excuse me. It's how do my readers care? Or if it's in broadcast, why should my audience care about this? It's all about them.
It's all about them.
All about them.
So let's turn the direction a little bit, because we're going to get to this book that you published. But why don't we first of all talk about your football career?
I played football in high school, and then through the process of elimination, I ended up at Edinburgh, Pennsylvania, played football there, and I played for 4 years. And the first 2 years were a disaster. After my sophomore year, they fired the coach who had won 5 games in 3 years. And the program was historically terrible. We were the doormats of the conference. They had 5 winning seasons in 44 years until they hired the new coach. They came in for my junior year. And I got some of the lessons that I put in the book here I got from Bill McDonald was his name, was our head coach, and some very good lessons from him. So I learned a lot of these things, or I noticed a lot of these things in college, but they never really sank in until I got out of school and I went to work, and I'm working at Curtis or the agencies or whatever. And I'm noticing these things in business, and I'm thinking, well, I learned that playing football. That's the way Mac used to do it when we were getting ready for a game. And I realized that there were several of these. And so I thought at one point, I should write an article about this. So I wrote what I thought was going to be like an op-ed piece for a magazine or something. And I wrote a draft, and nothing ever really came of it. And I put it on the back shelf and just kind of forgot about it. And then I was having lunch several years ago with this guy that I know who's written several books on Amazon. And he said to me, he said, you should write a book. And I said, about what? He says, I don't know. He said, you should have something you can write about. So I went back and I thought about it. And I thought, well, I've got this article here. I wonder if I could expand that into a book. And that's basically what I did. I sat down one night. It was about 9:30 on a Friday night, and I started writing. And I looked up, and it was 2 o'clock in the morning. And I said, I think I should go to bed. But actually, a good chunk of the book was from the original article, and then what I wrote in those 4.5 hours that night. That was a big chunk of the book, actually. And after that, I went in and kind of fleshed some things out and so forth. But that was most of it.
Yes, Amazon and other instant publishers have really changed the way publishing works, because now anybody can make an ebook, a paper book, with the tools they provide. It's not as simple as they say, though, as you're telling me.
No, yeah, but it's I doubt if any publisher would have ever picked up that, or I would have had to self-publish it and paid to have 1,000 copies printed or something like that, and my living room here would be stacked with boxes of unsold books. So
because that's the thing, is you publish the book, but now you got to sell it, and
then you're on your own.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. But Amazon, they one of their deals is if you give them exclusive control over it for, I think it's 90 days, that they'll push it out and they'll promote it. And so I don't know where it ended up, but I haven't sold very many. But I didn't sell it to get rich, or I didn't write it to get rich. Put it that way. Yeah. But I was up at Edinburgh we had a reunion of football players. And this was maybe 3 or 4 months after the book was published. And I probably had at least a half a dozen guys come up to me, "Hey, I read your book." I was like, "Great." So I went home then and looked at the sales on Amazon, and
No, you didn't.
nothing. Yeah, but they can download it for free through Kindle. So I
I
think,
guess
well,
there's that. Yeah.
yeah, but so they read it and they were happy with it. They said there were a lot of things in there that they forgot about, and it was kind of a memoir for them as much for me. So,
Mhm. Well,
so
I'm
anyway,
glad that you were able to get that together.
yeah.
Did you want to maybe walk some of us through some of the hard hitting lessons that are in the book?
Well, I'll start with two, and there were two that my brother taught me
Mhm.
because he was 2 years ahead of me in high school. And just as I was starting high school, one of the things he said to me was, always make sure you know your assignments, because if the coach knows what you're supposed to do, he'll never be afraid to put you in the game. And I always did that through my whole career. And for Bill McDonald, the last 2 years that I played, I don't ever remember making a mental mistake for Mac. I always knew my assignments. I always knew where to go, who to block, and so forth. And I can't say that about some of the other years, but for him, yeah, I mean, and there were a lot of physical mistakes. I made more than my share of those, but mental mistakes, no. I always knew what I was supposed to do. And one of the anecdotes in the book was we were at practice one day and we were going, the second team was on the ball and they're talking about some kind of a problem. And the first team, we were standing in the back, and he asked, Mac asked the one, Andy, said, "What's your rule on this play?" And we didn't have blocking assignments as such. We blocked by rules, and it'd take too long to explain, but it was a pretty good system actually. Um, and he asked this guy, he said, "What's your rule on this play?" And the guy said, "Well, I blocked this guy over here." And technically he was right. That was the guy that he blocked. But that wasn't the rule. And the coach said to him, he said, "I didn't ask you who you blocked." He said, "I asked you what your rule is." And he didn't know. So he yelled back to me. He says, "Tab, what's your rule on this play?" I said, and again, it'll take too long to explain it. I said, "The rules, number 2, unless 3 is over inside." He said, "Yep, that's right. That's your rule. Learn your rules." And I think one of the reasons he picked on me for that is because he knew that I would know the answer. So it's a mental game too. Football is more than just, hitting and running and whatever.
It's chess with lots of violence or something.
It's chess with live players. Yeah.
Yes. And on
Yeah.
the board, moving this way and that.
Yeah. Our offensive coordinator used to say that. He says, like a big chess game, we move our pieces to get an advantage. They move their pieces to gain an advantage too. So the other rule that my brother taught me was when we were in high school, we had equipment managers, and they were responsible for giving you your equipment when you went out to practice and putting it away after practice and some other things. And a lot of the ball players treated these guys like servants. They'd yell, bark. Uh, they wouldn't ask them to do stuff. They would tell them to do stuff. And my brother said, "Don't do that. Don't treat them like that. They're there to help you. And if you're nice to them, they'll be nice to you. And what goes around comes around." And I always did that. And I learned that when you get into business, people who work for you, if you treat them well, they'll treat you well. And it's the same thing, whether you're in high school football or working for a Fortune 500 corporation, it's all the same.
And not just people who work for you, but many ways the people who are in helper kind of roles, who some people would dismiss out of hand, like this assistant or this
Yeah.
secretary, because
Yeah.
these people are gatekeepers to a lot of things. And
Yeah.
if you don't have good relationships with you, they will keep you out.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. And you find that it's particularly when you're dealing with the media, when you call and, there's a gatekeeper there. I need to talk to, the business editor. Well, who are you? What do you want? And they're blocking you out like that. But the other thing too is, if you're good to them, they'll go out of their way to get you things that they wouldn't give to somebody else.
Mhm.
Hey manager, I need an extra roll of tape, or I need a clean towel. So, and they give it to me because I treated them well, and but they wouldn't give it to somebody else. So,
All appreciation, respect, all these things go a long way.
oh yeah, absolutely. And that's a lifelong kind of role that you learn too.
But it's hard for people to remember sometimes when they get overwhelmed or
Yeah.
painted in a corner or something like that, and then they lash out, and that's really unfortunate.
The other lesson that I wanted to mention was, I talked about how bad the Edinburgh football program was. So they hired this new coach, and our first team meeting, we're sitting in one of the big lecture halls, and the assistant coaches are sitting on the side, and the players are sitting in the middle, and the head coach wasn't there. So 7 o'clock meeting, I looked at my watch, 7 o'clock, here he comes. He walks in, there's a chalkboard in the front of the room. He walks up, doesn't say anything to anybody. He walks to the front of the room, he picks up a piece of chalk and he writes on the board, CHAMPIONSHIP, championship. And he turns around and he says, gentlemen, that's why I'm here. I leaned over to my roommate who was sitting next to me and I said, I think I'm gonna like this guy. And the point is, that was the goal. That's what we were working for. That's why we go to practice every day. That's why you work out in the off season. It's not just to win more games. It's not to win more games than you lost. It's not even to have an undefeated season. We're here to win a championship. That's why we're here.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And did you?
Actually, we did in his second year, which was my senior year.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Wow. So that was a very positive experience. It stays with you to this day, with you all through your career and all your relationships.
Yep.
Wonderful.
Yep. The other thing that I learned from Bill McDonald, and goes back to the thing about treating people well. One of the you read business books, and one of the things that they say is surround yourself with good people. And usually they're talking about, have a good attorney, have a good accountant, hire good managers, to work for you if you're running a store, for example. And what Mac used to do, he would bring the seniors in after the season was over, and we would have exit interviews. And I was done playing ball. I'd used up all my eligibility, but I was still going to be on campus the following fall because I wasn't going to graduate until December. And I was leery about walking away from football cold turkey. So I said to him, I said, if you want me, I'm going to be here. I'm more than willing to help out at spring ball. I can help coach the freshmen in the fall. Whatever you want me to do, I can do some of that. And he said, well, Ted, he said, I'm really glad to hear that. He says, because you're a quality person and we want quality people associated with our program. And we talked about that. And he said to me, he said, you can win games with good athletes, but to win championships, you need good people. And then he looked at me and he said, we're all about winning championships. And he was right. You got to have a good attorney, you got to have a good accountant, you got to have a good this, a good that. So anyway.
Well, thank you for all these lessons on leadership and employmentship and everything that you learned in many aspects of your life.
Yeah.
So here's another question I guess I'd like to put to you. Or I guess we'll get back to this. I mean, you have, when you wrote this book, then I guess we haven't picked it up where you worked with Amazon and then you ran into some issues. So just for the sake of people who are considering doing that, what did you run into?
Amazon has their own way of doing things, and they have their own special format for books. And I thought, I'm thinking, how tough can this be? So I formatted my book and I sent it off to them. They kept kicking it out for one reason or another. And sometimes they wouldn't even tell you the reason, they would just kick it out. Then I talked to a friend of mine who had written a book several months before that. And he said what he did was he went to Fiverr. And if you don't know what Fiverr is, it's Fiver. And their claim is that you can get anything done for $5. And that's not literally true, but you can get a lot of things done just for $5. If you have a brochure, for example, you can find somebody in Romania to lay it out for you for $5 or design it for you. But he said there are people on there who will format manuscripts for Amazon. And I hired two, it didn't work out. I got rid of them. But then the third one I hired was a woman, and I can't remember if she was from Mexico or Guatemala, but somewhere down there. And I sent her my manuscript and she said, okay, I can do this. I'll have it back to you in 48 hours. And she did, and I submitted it, and they took it, and everything was fine. And I think I paid her, it was either $50 or $75, but it was money very well spent because it went right through.
Because there's there's formatting stuff with them. There's things that may or may not add up.
Yeah.
And then from this, you can make an ebook, or you can make a paperback book from the same
Yeah.
stuff.
Right. And I did the cover myself in the back cover, but she had to lay out all the inside. And, when I put some photographs in there, where am I? So, she was responsible for doing that, and the chapter breaks and so forth. And she got everything set up. I told her, I wanted the chapter heading centered and bold and in larger type and blah, blah, blah. And she did it all. So I have no complaints with her. I just can't remember who she was.
So then once your book's on Amazon, you have a lot of control over things, and sometimes yet you don't. I mean, you can set your prices,
Yes.
and then there's the costs for copy to print, and make it exclusive or not.
Yeah, and then if I want copies of my own book, I have to buy them myself. Now, the good news is I get my commission at the end, so I get it at a big discount, but I still have to buy them myself. I have to put the money out up front.
And do you have to pay a sales tax on those ones then too, I guess, or?
I believe I do. And well, I have Amazon Prime, so I don't pay for shipping, but yeah, you pay for everything.
Because I was involved with the Historical Society, and one of our members published a book through Amazon. And that was when we had to get a sales tax number. Because in the volumes we were doing, like 200-300 books, that made a difference.
But the library shouldn't.
Oh, no, we don't pay sales.
You should be tax exempt, shouldn't you?
Yeah, but this was something where because they're retail, you had to have a tax number as a pass through to be able to purchase the books in quantity.
Okay.
So,
All right.
But yours is probably not a big enough quantity, at least not yet.
Unfortunately, it's not a big enough quantity
to worry about that right now.
Yes, right.
So you were talking also about maybe revising this book or doing another book. Is that still something in the cards?
I was thinking about doing a second edition because every now and then I pick it up and read through it, and I'm like, oh, I should have done this. I should have done that. I should have said this. And why did I put this in there? And so I will, at some point in time, I'll go back and do a second edition, clean it up.
Great.
Yeah.
I think that's most of my questions and comments. I think the main thing is, when I asked you earlier about what would you like to tell people who are aspiring to write, what kind of advice would you give anybody who wants to write anything?
I would say, just pick something that you like, that you enjoy, that you're passionate about. And that's what, you read things about authors who go back to college to teach writing, and they say, write about what you know, and write about what you like and what you're passionate about. And once you sit down and do that, then the words just kind of flow. You just kind of crank them out.
I mean, a lot of people.
Right, Catherine?
Oh, hello. I guess a lot of people could write stuff about what they don't know and do a lot of research, but it's possible they're going to miss something.
Yeah, but that research can get very time consuming and even expensive. Like there are people who will research historical novels or biographies of people, and that's a lot of time, a lot of detail, and a lot of fact checking and double checking, and and if you're retired, that's a good time to do it because you've got time in your hands, but that can really suck up a lot of time.
Because if you make mistakes that way, somebody will notice.
More than likely, yeah. Unless you're writing about something that happened in 76 BC, then there's nobody around to check. But
yeah, but somebody will figure out. There's train spotters everywhere, I guess.
Catherine?
You allowed to ask questions?
Yes.
Where'd that cat come from? You didn't have a cat before.
Yeah, she's 5 days here with me.
Oh, okay.
She had to go in the room for a while because it's a little much. So, Jim, you mentioned flow. I wanted to ask about that. If you felt like you would often get in the zone even maybe sometimes look at it and then say, wow, this is like so good. I'm surprised I wrote it, where you really feel like
I've never come to that point.
okay. And then did you have specific habits, like every morning at this time or a certain way? It was just kind of when you felt like it that you would
When I
sit down,
felt
right?
like it, I usually do it on evenings and weekends. It's like, I'll go up and work on the book for an hour or two, and I would do that. But like I said, when I sat down, maybe the first third of the book, well, there was the article too, but the first third of the book, I just sat down and just wrote it right out because there was a lot of stream of consciousness there and a lot of.
Oh, there you go.
a lot of
There's
my
your
background.
flow.
Pardon me?
There's your flow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
write about what you know. Well, I knew how I grew up. I remember that, so it made it easy.
All right. Thank you.
Sure.
Does anybody else have any questions for Jim?
Yeah, tell me about Amazon's costs. What when you print your book or whatever, give us some idea. Now, I know your book is fairly thin. It's not a real thick book.
Oh yeah, it's fairly
But
cheap.
what does Amazon charge you to print it?
Like I say, I have to buy it and I have to pay whatever the going rate is. And I don't even remember how much it costs. I think it's $5.99, something like that, $6.99. So if it's $6.99 and I want to buy 10 copies, and I have to pony up $70.
Mhm.
I don't know the sales tax, and I don't have to pay for shipping. And then if I want to sell them somewhere, I can do that. And if they sell them, they'll sell it for $6.99. And they won't cut you a check until your royalties hit $100, and then they'll send you a check for $100.
Hmm.
So, but yeah, I mean, to get the book to Amazon costs you nothing. You can write a book and put it up there, and it won't cost you a dime. Unless you get somebody to lay it out for you.
What do they pay you on Kindle books if somebody downloads it on a Kindle?
Kindle, I don't think I can get anything on Kindle.
Oh,
But
you
I get
should.
70% of the purchase price on a hard copy.
You should be getting something on a Kindle.
I don't think I do.
Is that part of the arrangement that they're part of this whole Kindle library, so they're included with a membership sort of thing?
I think you can, if you want to opt out of Kindle, and this has been a couple of years ago now, so I don't remember all the particulars, but I think you can opt out of Kindle if you want and just have the hard copy.
Well, why would you want to give it away for free on Kindle then?
Just exposure. I mean, because like I said, I'm not doing this to make money.
Yeah.
And I've got it on my website, so I was going to send you my newsletter, Jerry. I forgot to do that.
Oh, yes. Let's talk about your newsletter in case anybody's interested.
Yeah. But it's a business newsletter. It's for clients and prospective clients. So it's not, but some of it's kind of fun stuff. I have a section in there called More Odd Than Ends, and that's exactly what it is, more odd than ends. So it's weird stuff that I come across here and there. And there's a lot of weird stuff out there.
Is your website easy to remember? The name of it is like jimtabaczynski.com or something?
It's JP. Well, now I started my own business, right? Mm-hmm. And one of the first things I realized was I can't be Tabaczynski and Associates because they don't make business cards that big. So I did something else. So I used my initials, and it's JPT Group. And the thought was I've got a group, so I've got, graphic designers or printers or whoever I'm going to work with. So they're all part of the group. Because people used to ask me, how many people in the group this week? And I said, well, none. But I've got all these, or how many employees do I have? I have no employees, but I have people in the group. So what was the point of that? Oh, jptgrouppr.com is the newsletter, or my website rather.
Yes.
And you can buy the book from there. I've got the book in my newsletter every month. And you can download the booklet on newsletters from the website. And no, one of the odds and ends, and this is the one I just thought of. You know how cities will have these programs where they want you to turn in your guns. There was a guy somewhere in Czechoslovakia, his city, or it wasn't Prague, it was somewhere else. They had one of these gun or turn-in programs, and the gun he turned in was a Soviet T-34 tank. And they had a picture of him driving this tank up to this collection area.
So yes,
Anyway. And yeah, I put some other fun stuff in there. I have a quote of the month. I have a month of the month where I tell you what the month is this month. You know, National Spaghetti Month or National Pickle Month or whatever it is. You would not believe some of the months that are out there.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a website that I go to and they have all these things listed.
I know.
Month of the month, quote of the month, and the question of the month. Come up with some kind of weird question, and if you want to know the answer, you click on the link, and the answer's on my website. So you can go look that stuff up.
yes.
Yes.
Did-
Fine.
Is there another question?
Fine.
I just have a question about copyright and stuff like that. In a book like yours, I imagine you had a number of newspaper clippings and maybe some letters that have been written or something. And I had done a thank you note project where I wrote a thank you note a day, and I've written a story about that. But there are so many letters that are personal, and there's so many clippings from the Plain Dealer and an article by Terry Pluto and stuff like that. I just now discovered that you've got to get everybody's permission to do any of that stuff. And it's
Yeah.
daunting. I mean, I'm about ready to give up the project because I don't want to spend the rest of my remaining few days checking out whether you want to be in my book, Jim, you know? You wrote me a letter, but it turns out it's not really mine. It's still kind of yours.
So you need permission, I guess, technically. Of course, when you write somebody a letter, isn't that yours by default or not?
A letter, yeah, is
Yeah.
different because that's not something that's published.
It's not published or
No.
copyrighted. No.
As a courtesy, if you got a letter from Terry Pluto, then I would call Terry and say, Terry, I'd like to use this in my book or whatever it is you're going to do.
Yeah.
And it gets something in an email from him saying, yeah, go ahead and do it. Because I do that all this time for this one newsletter that I do. We get guest bloggers come in, and I just did an article that I stole from Catherine a couple weeks ago, right? And in that case, I might put a teaser in and then say more, or if you want to read the rest of the article, you click here and it goes to the website wherever that article resides.
Yeah.
And
Well,
you
that's a big
don't
deal.
need to get copyright permission there because you're sending them back to the article. So, if they want to sue me for driving traffic to their website, go ahead.
I guess the other thing I thought about that, Glenn, too, is if you have an article from the Plain Dealer, is you don't have to put the whole thing in your book.
Yeah.
Just if you have a 1 or 2 line quote from it, and you have the source,
Yeah.
that's fair. You can
And
do
if you
that.
give attribution, according to the Plain Dealer quote,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
That's
Well, I
exactly
had in
what-
mind, you remember Philip Morris? I don't know whatever happened to him. He was a great writer for the columnist for the Plain Dealer. And he
He was a
wrote a
singer.
wonderful story that just fits into my book so well. But it's the whole thing. It's like a picture of me and the whole article and everything. And
Is he still
can't-
alive?
I don't know where, well, I can't find him. I've called the Plain Dealer and he just sort of vanished, but I don't know. It just seems like all this easy stuff was kind of pulling things together. Now,
Yeah.
the hard stuff is trying to decide whether, how to get it actually out there without going to. Now, the interesting thing is no one's ever going to read the book. So no one's ever going to sue me for any proceeds or anything. It's not like I'm subject to a lot.
That's the way I looked at it too. If you want to sue me, go ahead. There's nothing to take. I mean,
I think that's probably what I'm going to do. Just
Yeah.
assume that.
yeah, but I think if you're not going to use the whole thing and you give attribution, you should be okay.
Yeah, I should be okay.
Even if you do use the whole thing, show them where you got it, the name of the book, the name of the paper, if you know the date of the paper, put that in,
Oh, yeah, I got all that.
put all that in. But as long as you're not passing it off as your own work, you should be okay.
And not reproducing the entire thing
Yeah.
that's owned by copyright, because I think a lot of the fair use things, it leans on what? what proportion of it are using, what purpose,
Yeah.
Yeah, and
what's
you
the
have
net
to
effect.
give attribution too, I think.
Yes.
But if you had written me a very heartfelt, sincere, personal letter that's appropriate, I mean, I feel like the very least I
I'd
have
sue your
to do
pants off.
is to ask you whether you'd like to be in the book or not.
Well,
Would
you
you
should,
say?
yeah. Just,
Yeah.
if nothing else, out of common courtesy, you do that.
Yeah, right.
Because when I put a couple quotes from Bill McDonald in here, and he was still alive at the time when I originally wrote the article, and I sent it to him. I said, if you have a problem with any of this, let me know. So,
Well, that's my saving grace. I'm so old that there's hardly anybody I have to check with anymore. They're all gone.
that's right. Yeah. Yeah. Bill McDonald's not going to care. He's been dead for almost 20 years.
That's why they hold the census records for 73 years. By that
And
point,
my roommate passed away last spring, so I don't have to worry about him
Yeah.
anymore either. So,
Did he know about the book or did he?
oh yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, good. That's nice.
Oh, you mean my roommate or
The
coach?
roommate.
Yeah, my roommate did. Yeah, and actually, I sent a copy of the book to the coach's widow, and she read it, and she
Oh, how
sent me a
nice.
very nice note back. She said, "Oh, Bill would have been so proud."
Yeah, no, that's right. Yeah, that's
Sure.
great.
Yeah.
so here's somebody, Jim, who's written this book and published his first book. Well, which is kind of like you did it because you wanted to do it and you loved it and you wanted to spread the word and you certainly weren't going to get rich. It was for a very special audience, the right audience.
Mm-hmm. I did it for shits and giggles, as they say.
Mhm. Because you could. Well,
Because I
good on you. There's a lot of lessons to be
Yeah.
learned and some real hard-hitting ones as well.
It was a good experience too, just to sit down and write the whole thing out like that. It was good.
Now, my big question is, what position did you play? Were you a lineman or?
I was an offensive end, and most of the time I was the tight end. But there's a story about how I became a split end too. And after Catherine answers her question, I'll tell you that story.
Okay.
I was gonna say, from what I understand, people who make money from books, it's not really from the sale of the book. It's because they go
Right.
out and have paid speaking engagements and talk about it that way.
Right. They use it as a marketing tool.
Yeah, so have you considered that?
Being a speaker, not really, no.
Right,
But if I get into a situation where there's a potential client out there, I might send them a copy. Because there's a guy that I know in Akron who's written a few of these books. And he said when he gets into a sales presentation, what he says is, what he tells his prospective client is, do you want to work for the guy who read the book or do you want to work for the guy who wrote the book? And he said, he holds up his and here, I say, I wrote the
Yeah,
book.
there you go.
Yeah, so.
Clever.
So anyways, I went through the first half of my junior year playing tight end. And I walked out to the stadium for practice on Monday. And I went into the football office for something and the coach was there and he said, "Oh, I'm glad you're here." And I thought, 3 o'clock on Monday, where else would I be? So he says, the coaches were talking and we think we might want you to learn the split end position. I said, okay, I can do that. I said, my playbook's back in the dorm. I'll look at it tonight and tell me what you want to do. And he said, oh, great. So we got to practice an hour later. We're on the field. And he said, all right, let's get that A offense out there. And we go out and we get in the huddle. And I'm standing in the huddle where the tight end should be. And he turns around, looks at me, and he says, get over here. You're playing split end now. I said, okay. So I moved over to that spot in the huddle. And they called the play. And I turned and looked at him. I said, okay, what do I do? And he starts yelling at me for not knowing my assignment. I said, wait a minute, 30 seconds ago, I was playing a different position. How am I supposed, I can't learn this in 30 seconds. I did, that was Monday, and I learned the position by Saturday. So he was happy with that. So I ended up playing the rest of the season as a split end.
All right. So are there any more questions for Jim? Because we probably have to wrap it up soon.
Yeah.
If not, I have an announcement I've already discussed with some people, is that we do have a writers group at Avon Lake Public Library that meets third Monday of the month at 7 o'clock. You can come in person to the library or you can join us at Zoom. All the information is on our library website calendar about all the programs we're having this fall. And we're going to do a lot of programs like this. You choose Zoom or in person. And we'd love to join you. I know that several of us here, including Jim and Glenn and Catherine, led the writers group for many years before this, that hopefully will still remain involved. And we welcome any new members who want to join us. And it sounds like Marilyn's somewhat interested.
Mhm.
So yeah, sign up. See you here either way. And of course, our new leader is Tina Bartish, been a member of the group for a long time, and she's got a lot of good ideas. I know she's been talking to you, Catherine, as well. And I'm really stoked for this fall about what the writers group's going to be like. So hope some of you join us and spread the word.
Thank you very much. Thanks for all your
Yes.
questions. Thanks for listening.
Yes, thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you. Very interesting.
Yes.
Yes. Well, okay. That's it for Read, Write Local, Unbound. Jim Tabaczynski. I'm Jerry Vogel at Avon Lake Public Library, and we'll see you all soon.